The story begins on a jungle trail in 1967, where a confident Viet Cong commander suddenly realizes the forest has gone silent, just seconds before an invisible enemy strikes from the darkness. It's a tale of the Australian SAS, a handful of elite soldiers who faced an impossible task: to paralyze a vast enemy supply network not with mass, but with absolute silence and psychological terror. What unfolds will reveal the brutal discipline of men who became ghosts, expose the strategic panic that seized an entire army, and uncover the humbling lesson that patience can be a deadlier weapon than firepower. Before we begin this journey together, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this story with someone who understands that true strength lies in mastery and mind over matter, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. March 23, 1967, Phuoc Truy Province, South Vietnam. Nguyen Van Ye moved through the jungle trail with the confidence of a man who'd walked this path 100 times. A veteran cadre of the Viet Cong's D445 battalion, he knew every bend, every stream, every patch of thinning canopy. Behind him, 12 porters carried rice, ammunition, and medical supplies south from the Courtney rubber plantation. It was routine. The Americans rarely ventured this deep into VC territory, and when they did, you could hear them a kilometer away: helicopters, armored carriers, entire companies crashing through the bush like water buffalo. Tio paused at a fallen log, letting his eyes adjust. Something felt wrong. A disturbance in the jungle's rhythm. The nightbirds had gone quiet. He raised a fist, halting the column. He would never know that 6 Australian SAS soldiers had been watching his approach for 4 hours, positioned in ambush less than 5 meters from the trail. He would never know they had tracked his unit since dawn, moving so silently they had passed within arm's reach of VC sentries. What Nguyen Van Ye would learn in the last seconds of his life was that the trails his people had used with impunity for years were no longer safe. The Australians had arrived, and they had brought a way of fighting that would fundamentally alter how the Viet Cong moved, thought, and operated. For the Viet Cong, this trail network was their strategic lifeblood, a sophisticated logistics artery carved over decades. The trails were our strength, recalled Vu Van Tao, a former VC company commander. We could move entire companies at night. The Americans made so much noise, we always knew they were coming. We felt safe. That confidence was well-founded. American search and destroy operations moved in company or battalion strength. The noise signature was enormous. Radio chatter, clanking equipment, hundreds of boots. We could hear them from a kilometer away, sometimes 2, said VC intelligence operative Lu Min. We would just avoid them. This bred a fatal complacency. The trails had remained secure through the French occupation and the early American buildup. Communist forces had moved millions of tons of supplies down these routes. Senior VC commanders viewed them as virtually unassailable. When rumors first spread of Australian troops operating differently, many VC cadres dismissed them. The Australians were few. Initially, just 1 squadron, fewer than 100 men. What could such a small force accomplish that American battalions could not? We thought they'd be like the Americans, but with funny accents, one former VC fighter recalled. We were very, very wrong. The Australian SAS was different. It was a direct action unit, optimized for reconnaissance and ambush. Its philosophy, forged in the jungles of Malaya, was starkly different. The Americans were fighting a war of movement and firepower, wrote Major Brian Wade, who commanded the 1st SAS Squadron in Vietnam. We were fighting a war of time and silence. Their patrol structure reflected this. While Americans moved in platoons of 30 or 40 men, SAS patrols consisted of just 4 to 6. Every soldier was a skilled tracker, medic, and radio operator. They moved in absolute silence, could sustain themselves for weeks, and studied the enemy with academic intensity. When the first SAS patrols infiltrated the trail networks in late 1966, they came armed not just with weapons, but with knowledge. They knew the schedules, the routes, the patterns. Their technique was ambush saturation, maintaining multiple small patrols on different trails simultaneously. The goal wasn't just to kill. It was to create the perception that no trail was safe, that the jungle itself had turned hostile. We wanted them paranoid, recalled Sergeant Ross Foster. If they're afraid of the trails, they stop using them. If they stop using them, their logistics collapse. Simple as that. The turning point came not in a single battle, but during a relentless 3-week campaign in March 1967. Operation Hayman. 6 4-man SAS patrols were inserted along the trail networks feeding from the Maytao Mountains. Sergeant Bob Mattern's patrol, call sign 23 Alpha, took 4 days to cover 7 kilometers, moving at a painstaking pace to leave no trace. They dug shallow scrapes in the jungle floor at a perfect ambush site, a trail bend where targets would be silhouetted, and settled in. You learn to make friends with discomfort, Mattern recalled. Ants, leeches, suffocating humidity. You don't move. You become part of the jungle. For 3 days, nothing. Then, on March 23rd, movement. A faint pad of feet, the creak of equipment. Corporal Jack Kennedy squeezed Mattern's ankle twice. Contact closing. A VC patrol of 13 men materialized. Mattern waited, letting the lead element pass within 4 meters. He waited until the last man entered the killing zone. Then, a 3-round burst from his L1A1 rifle triggered a simultaneous volley from his team, a wall of lead that lasted 4 seconds. 13 VC entered the zone. None left. But this was just one strike. Over 21 days, SAS patrols conducted 14 ambushes, killing an estimated 63 VC while suffering 0 casualties. What made it psychologically devastating wasn't the casualties, explained Captain Bill Henderson, the SAS operations officer. It was the pattern. They couldn't use any trail without risk. Every bend could hide death. The VC response revealed pure panic. Intelligence intercepts showed frantic requests to abandon supply routes. Porters refused assignments. Units began moving in larger, more detectable company-size groups. We realized these were not Americans, said VC operative Lou Min. Americans you could hear. These ghosts, we called the Ma, appeared from nothing. Killed, vanished. Trails we'd used for years became graveyards. A captured D-445 battalion order from April 1967 mandated avoiding all trails on moonlit nights. The enemy was now restricting its own freedom of movement. The Viet Cong adapted. They extended point elements to 100 meters ahead. They used clearing patrols to sweep trails and fire randomly into the jungle. But the SAS adapted faster. They began using command-detonated claymore mines from greater distances. When VC moved in larger groups, the SAS called in artillery and airstrikes. They conducted harassment ambushes, firing a few shots then vanishing, to create maximum uncertainty. We were in their heads, said Warrant Officer Ken Davidson. Make every journey a mental ordeal. By late 1967, the VC had largely abandoned daytime trail movement. Advance rates plummeted from 15 to 20 kilometers per night to 5 to 8. Some units began the massive labor of cutting entirely new trails. It became a chess match, said Major Jim Hughes. Every move they made, we countered. But the fundamental equation never changed. They needed those trails, and we made every trail a gamble with death. The strategic impact was staggering. A captured North Vietnamese report from 1968 stated bluntly, trail security cannot be guaranteed. Alternative supply methods must be developed. They had given up. While SAS kill ratios were impressive, approaching 50 to 1, their true victory was logistical. VC supply throughput in the province dropped by an estimated 60%. We essentially blockaded the province using 100 men, noted Lieutenant Colonel David Rankin, a task force intelligence officer. A conventional force would have needed thousands. Before the SAS full deployment, the VC massed nearly 2,000 troops for the Battle of Long Tan. By February 1968, they could only concentrate 400 for an attack on Nui Dat. Their logistics had been strangled. The human cost for the VC was severe. Every shadow could be death, recalled a former D-445 soldier. You never relaxed. Porter recruitment became nearly impossible, forcing the VC into conscription that eroded their popular support. For the SAS, the tempo was punishing. Patrols lasted 7 to 10 days, with only brief recovery. They lived on one meal a day, went weeks without bathing, and endured constant stress. People think it was glamorous, said Corporal Jim Wallace. It was miserable. Hunger, exhaustion, fear, boredom punctuated by terror. But we were winning. They were terrified of us. That made the misery worthwhile. The final validation came in 1971. When Australian forces withdrew, VC activity immediately surged. The trails were used openly again. It was definitive proof. It was the SAS campaign alone, not general Allied pressure, that had paralyzed them. The Australian SAS campaign against the VC trail networks endures as a textbook example of small unit effectiveness in modern warfare. A force that never numbered more than 120 men achieved operational results that would typically require a brigade of 3,000 or more. The lessons learned in Phuoc Thi resonated across the globe. American Special Forces integrated SAS patrol techniques into their doctrine, while the British SAS applied these hard-won lessons in Oman and Northern Ireland. The concept of the strategic ambush, using precise, small-unit violence to induce widespread paralysis, became a cornerstone of special operations. As U.S. Special Forces Colonel Charlie Beckwith, an observer of the SAS, later noted, the Australians proved that warfare isn't always about firepower and numbers. Sometimes it's about perfecting the fundamentals, tracking, silence, patience, until you make the enemy afraid of the very ground they walk on. For the Viet Cong in Phuoc Thi, the legacy was one of strategic failure. The province never became the secure base area they needed. When major NVA offensives erupted in 1968 and 1972, Phuoc Thi was a quiet sector. The logistical web had been systematically severed by a handful of soldiers whose mastery of the jungle was absolute. The Australians understood the jungle in a way we never expected from Westerners. Former VC commander Vo Van Thou conceded decades later. They fought our war on our ground, by our rules, and they beat us at it. We never truly controlled Phuoc Thi. The trails were the reason. Today, the same trails are slowly being reclaimed by the jungle, their dark history fading into the soil. But for the men on both sides, they remain a powerful testament to a fundamental truth. In war, superiority is not always a matter of technology or numerical strength. Sometimes it is the silent, patient art of making an enemy too terrified to walk where they once moved with impunity. That was the victory secured by a handful of men on a darkened trail in March of 1967. It is a lesson the Viet Cong learned, and one they never forgot.